Hello. Okay, so I haven't done a live in a long time. I got my little real estate signs back there, but today we're not talking about real estate. We're talking about faith. You know, I've for those of you who don't know me, my name is Rhodonna Boyd. I'm an author and a minister. I'm a real estate agent as well, but in ministry, I'm big on walking out our lives practically by faith. And so I wanted to log on today. I shared a video on my Facebook page earlier I shared a video on my page earlier about faith and just kind of walking it out. Sometimes we have dreams, we have vision from God, we have prophetic words, and we don't necessarily know how to navigate that without getting ahead of God. And so I wanted to talk a little bit today about the practical side of faith, because there's always a doing part. James, in the book of James, it says that James said, you show me your faith without works, I'll show you my faith by my works, because you cannot prove that you believe anything if you're not doing anything in the direction of that thing, right? But I want you to be careful to not cross the line of the doing of faith and showing up and rolling up your sleeves and doing your part and then going ahead of God. I'm going to share a really brief piece of a testimony where God really blessed me with a house. This was some years ago, and if you can go to my page, the Kenneth Copeland's Believer's Voice of Victory, they did it on my testimony and televised it, and for specifically around that. And in that process, one of the things I learned, I had watched so many people say, okay, I believe God, and then they got something and then they lost it over and over and over, whether it was a house or a car or a business or different things that they stepped out and then they lost it. And I'm like, well, God, if your word says that the blessing of the Lord makes rich and does not add sorrow to it, then to me, that's sorrow if you get it and then you lose it. So is it really a blessing? Is it really you? And so I remember being very intentional to make sure that I did not move ahead of God. And I wanted to walk it out by faith and not jump and try to make anything happen in my own strength. And so basically, one of the things that I saw is in that process, I had worked on my credit, the practical side. I had done work on my credit for a couple of years, and I still was just shy of what I needed it to be. And I remember I did that part and I continued to work on it, but it seemed like it just wasn't moving. I remember sowing, God shifted that. And then once I got it, I still could not get a pre-approval for my house. So long story short, when I got the pre-approval, long story short, when the last person out of many said no to a pre-approval, I remember calling my agent and saying, hey, the last ditch effort, they still said no. And she said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I still believe that this is my house. And because I really felt like there were so many things in the process that I felt like God was showing me that this was the house that he had for me. And so I was just like, I've done everything I can do. So at this point, if it's God, I believed it was God. I said, it's really in God's hands. He has to do something. Don't you know that within an hour, I got a call back saying to get your key, to come and get the key for that house. This was a brand new construction house. Nobody ever lived in. This is not even heard of. Nobody's giving the keys to a brand new house to somebody who can't get pre-approved. Long story short, I did end up closing on that about 8 months later after I was in the house. But my point is that in that process, I remember there were dollar amounts that I didn't want to go past. I wanted to make sure that what I was paying, I could pay, and that I wasn't going beyond God. And so I remember the dollar amount I got, it was higher than I wanted, but technically I could pay it. But I just kind of was like, okay, let me just pause. And don't you know that I went on through the process, and that thing came back ultimately being, by the time we closed, my mortgage payment was $600 less than what it originally was supposed to be, right? And so my whole point is that you don't have to, in the process, force anything. Don't try to force anything. Do everything you can do. And when things come up that seem insurmountable, just pause and allow God to do it. When you've done everything you can, give him that opportunity. And that's why I wanted to do this video, because I think sometimes we talk about the concept of faith and it's up here over our head somewhere. And me being a person that was born and raised in the church, I just watched certain things over time, and I'm like, man, I felt like I was always missing the how to. Well, how do you connect the dots? I understand the spiritual concept, but over time, like, the things they're not coming together. So I'm like, well, how do I make this work? How does this even make sense? And I will buy book after book. I will listen to sermon after sermon for the areas that I needed development in. And I was having such a hard time finding the practical, basic steps of how to. Stop telling me just the spiritual, scriptural principles. Yes, I need those. Those are foundational. But now that I have those principles and that foundation laid, tell me on a day-to-day basis, how do I walk this out by faith? The Bible says that the just shall live by faith, and we walk by faith and not by sight. But the question is, what the heck does that even mean? And how do I do that? That's the trick. And so I wanted to get on and share that bit of practical information and faith journeys that when you're doing it, yes, you want to roll up your sleeves and do your part, but do not move ahead of God. When it gets to a point where you've done what you can, you don't have to try to force it to happen. You know, it's almost like if you get a prophetic word that you're going to meet a man and you're going to be married when you want to be married, and then every guy you meet, you go try to do something and get in front of him, and you know, that's you trying to make it happen. I'm not saying don't be presentable, don't show up looking good, smelling good, you know, men are visual, all of that. I'm not saying don't do those things and be mindful, but don't try to force it. If God is giving you a word, don't try to force anything to happen. Do your part and let God be the one to fill in the gap. So I always say you want to make space and make room for God to do things. Same thing in the presence of God and in prayer. Sometimes we're so busy talking, we're so busy singing, we're so busy all of that. But if you just stop for a moment and just be quiet, sometimes you can hear God, or he'll show you a picture, or he'll say a word, or you'll hear a song and it's an answer to what you've been praying for. But if you never give that breathing room for him to speak, then you're steamrolling. So don't steamroll over the voice of God. Don't steamroll over God moving and doing his part. Have the faith, do your part, but give God space and don't move ahead of him. Don't try to force anything in faith. That's a practical thing to consider when it comes to faith. So if you're not familiar with me, again, my name is Rhodonna Boyd. Join our Facebook community where my link to my website has that link. It's at GrowFaith.online, GrowFaith.online, and the Facebook community link is there on the top of the page. I do a weekly prayer and biblical meditation. Is called the Word Bath. It's soaking in the Word, talking about the Word, praying into the Word, sitting quietly and seeing the promises of God in your heart. It's biblical meditation. And then we do some other things, but get connected with me. Follow me here. Like the video if you enjoy. Share it with someone. I'm going to start coming on doing some lives and just really sharing some practical things about faith. And so follow me if you've not already subscribed. God bless you. I love you, and we'll talk soon. Bye.